I've been meditating for an hour a day for probably 15 years now.
Wow, that is very impressive. That
Yeah.
is very, very, very impressive. So today we're going to learn from Cyrus, from his personal experience, about understanding the mind and, in particular, how do we get out of our mind? I know this is something
Mhm.
that I can struggle with, is just getting stuck in my head. And
Mhm.
when I saw when I saw that video of yours, I was like, wow, like the way he explained it, it really hit the nail on the head.
Do you want me to try to explain it now for anyone who's listening who hasn't
Yeah.
seen that video?
Yeah.
Well, how did I say it? Something like when people get stuck in their head, they think they're literally stuck in their head because they think just because a thought comes up, they have to follow it. So you'll notice that if you have a thought, if the listener is listening and they're hearing a thought pop up in their head, normally they assume they have to believe that thought or follow that thought. And in fact, they could just listen to the sound of my voice instead, or they could listen to the sounds in the room around them, or they could feel the air on their skin, or they could feel the tingling in their hands and fingers. Like they don't even have to look at their hands and fingers, just by mentally placing their spotlight on their hands and fingers, they'll feel a subtle aliveness, the chi, the tingling sensation and vibration. And the longer they place their attention there in their hands and fingers, the stronger that feeling will become. And you'll notice that the longer you hold your full attention on your hands and fingers, the less you're in your head. Because normally people are just placing their attention on the thoughts. And so that has all the momentum. But any of these other things that I directed people to place their attention on garner a momentum the longer you hold your attention there. And that's what meditation is essentially. It's placing your attention on something other than your thoughts, unless you're meditating on your thoughts, and then allowing that to generate its own momentum over time so that you have an ability to move and shift your attention and shift gears and not be stuck in one gear. That's what people are
Mm.
describing when they say they're stuck in their head. But it goes deeper than that. That's just a surface level taste.
Yeah, and we can go through all that today. Maya, you speak in a very calm manner, I will say.
Good. That's just my
Yeah.
voice, but I'm glad it's calming.
Yeah. So I do have a list of questions here that I just wanted to, yeah, just run through and just ask you and understand you a little bit more, because I don't really know too much about you. I did do a little bit of research today. I did actually do your 12-minute meditation this morning.
Nice.
That was because
Cool.
that was one of your most popular videos, I noticed, if you
Yeah,
know
it's a
that.
body scan. So
Yeah.
just like we just did with the hands, it's just guiding the attention through the whole body in a sequence, as opposed to traditional meditation is often just focus on your breath. And it's
Mm,
one focus point, especially for people with ADHD like me, or
mm,
basically anyone who's impatient, which is everyone these days. Just focusing on your breath can feel boring very quickly.
yeah.
Whereas moving your attention from your forehead to your nose, to your lips, to your throat, to your shoulders, etc., and following a rhythm and momentum is typically more engaging for people and has the same effect of getting you in a rhythm of presence, getting you grounded in a moment, getting you out of your head. So
Mm.
yeah,
I
and
thought it
those
was
questions, uh, I would enjoy being asked one of those questions out of order, out of the order
Ooh,
that you have them written down. I'd be
okay.
curious to see what happens.
Let's straight off the bat. I'm looking at the first one. Has there been any key struggles or turning points that have shaped you?
I had severe ADHD growing up, like I alluded to, and that prevented me from being able to focus on almost anything except what I found particularly interesting, which is a common but commonly misunderstood or not at all understood aspect of ADHD, where people with ADHD tend to not be able to focus at all on what they don't care about and can hyper focus and focus deeply on what they do care about, what they are passionate about, which sounds like a common experience for anybody. Like anybody would say, yeah, I struggle to focus on stuff I don't care about. I can focus easier on things I do care about. But for people with ADHD, that split and that distance between them is much more extreme on average. And so because I struggled with that, and my parents wouldn't sign the parental permission form for ADHD medication, I had to learn meditation. And because I had such severe ADHD, I had to go much deeper into meditation than most people would at the age that I did. And so whatever knowledge, skill I developed in that was a consequence of, as is the case in many people's origin stories, the pain point that was salient to me at the time that led me to develop it as a reaction of sorts.
Hmm. So, how long have you been meditating for, roughly? Like, You mean like very consistent?
I've been meditating for an hour a day for probably 15 years now.
Wow, that is very impressive. That
Yeah.
is very, very, very impressive.
I mean, I could see how it seems impressive from an outside perspective, but for me, it was more of an aspect of survival, I suppose.
Mm.
It's not that way anymore, but that's how it started. It was like I couldn't function without it. And now that I can function without it, I see the benefits of going into deeper meditation as a choice. And that's really what I try to promote. Like if you go on my YouTube, there's a lot of options. If you go to the playlist, if you go to the mental level on YouTube and then you go to the playlist tab, there's a high level focus and awareness playlist. And that's for longer meditations because when most people meditate, like I'm assuming if people in your audience are listening to this, they're curious about meditation and mindfulness. Where most people get stuck, I would say, is they get caught in the trap of mindfulness, which is like, let me go on an app and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes and, lower my heart rate a bit, lower my stress levels, whatever. But then they plateau because it's like the equivalent of going to the gym. And you can appreciate this as a trainer, doing a couple warm up sets and then being like, yeah, feeling pretty loose. I'm done for the day. Right. Whereas all your gains really can't come on the tail end of the 30-minute mark, the 40-minute mark, when you're actually in a rhythm, your muscles are fully warmed up, you can push close to failure. That's where you're getting the gains. It's the same with meditation. 20 minutes, you're warming up. 30 minutes, you're in a rhythm. 40 minutes, you're going deep in the zone. Now you're
Mm.
doing life-changing meditation stuff once you're going past that 30, 40-minute mark into the 50-minute, even an hour range, which I realize is mind-bogglingly long for most people, but most people stop at the 20-minute mark on the upper range. And so they're leaving all the benefits on the table. They're investing all this time up front. And if they just pushed a little further, they'd get exponentially more gains from the practice.
I love that. That's something that we can definitely dive into right now is just around meditation because that seems like your main thing. So I'd love to dive deep with you on what you feel like works around like meditation. Like how long do you reckon you should start? Do you think you should start with like focusing on the breath in and out, or do you recommend listening to something if you want to take the floor with that?
I would say there's no one size fits all, obviously, and there's no easy answer to that question, but I could give general guidelines. And what I'd say first off is, yeah, you could always meditate using the in and out of the breath, the nostrils, the good old fashioned technique. That works. A lot of neurodivergent people, such as myself, will struggle with that because it is so relatively monotonous in comparison to like when I have an ADHD friendly playlist on my YouTube, and that really comes down to mixing it up, gamifying your attention, um, using multiple focus points. So if I say, Dylan, focus on your breath right now, you can probably start to snag your breath with your attention. But after about 5 seconds, your mind's going to wander. But if I say, Dylan, focus on your breath and focus on your hands at the same time, not striving, not trying, just a delicate, relaxed balance of breath and hands. Now you have a challenge. You have a little tension, but you have a sense of relaxation that you have to maintain simultaneously to stay in that flow. It's different. It's markedly different than just focusing on your breath, but it's going to be a lot more effective for a lot of people because it's giving them, you can almost think of it as putting another weight on the bar. If you're doing a chest press, it's like just that extra level of challenge can counterintuitively be better for a lot of people because they think, meditation's too challenging. My mind's always wandering. It's like, add a little challenge, throw in a second focus point, or mix up the rhythm of the focus, the sequence of the focus, and you're going to stay engaged throughout. It's like going to the gym and doing one exercise versus doing four.
Mm.
The latter is probably going to be a much more engaging workout. So that's one thing. Play around with different styles of meditation until you find the one that works for you. But as far as length, I would say, yeah, you can always do 5 minutes of meditation, just like 5 minutes of working out is going to be better than 0 minutes of working out. Just like 10 minutes is going to be better than 0 minutes. But to the point of what you said, 5 minutes of a focused workout is going to be better than 10 minutes of an unfocused workout. Probably. Because the 10 minutes where you're unfocused, you're going to be inefficient. Maybe you have poor form and it just ends up being sloppy overall. So it's the same with meditation. If you do longer, typically it's going to be better if you have a high level of intention. But if you go in thinking, I got this extra time, let me mess around, then yeah, it's going to be a mess. But if you have that intention, longer tends to give you more of an opportunity to get into rhythm, get in more of a flow. And once you're in that flow, you can stabilize that flow. And now we're starting to talk high level meditation, because this is past the point that most beginners would even begin to worry about. But once you start to stabilize that flow, that's when you're going to see a lot of translation of those benefits from the cushion into your daily life. But the last thing I would say is that's focus and awareness style meditation. There's also, I guess you could say, emotional meditations like the letting go technique that I have on my YouTube that people have to be cautious with, in the sense that they should start small, but
Mm.
and start with smaller feelings. But it's essentially letting up your feelings, like, for example, your stressors, your anxieties, your negative emotions, and the meditative art of focusing your attention on the sensations in the body, not the thoughts. Because when people typically feel their feelings, or they hear on a podcast, like, you should feel your feelings, it's really important to feel your emotions. They try it, they sit down, they let up their anxiety, and then they start to have anxious thoughts, and the anxious thoughts exacerbate the feeling, and they go, oh, F this, I'm just getting more anxious from feeling my feelings. This doesn't work. It just mires me and gets me even more stuck in rumination. But what they're not doing is practicing, for example, letting go technique, which is the skill of going past the thoughts, deprioritizing them, and consciously focusing just on the sensations in the body, and then
Mm.
releasing resistance to them. And as you combine those two things, the focus on the sensations themselves, not the thoughts, and the releasing of resistance, the energy behind those thoughts, or behind those feelings rather, starts to dissipate.
Yeah.
And then you go from feeling like, there's this stuck feeling that I didn't know what to do with, that I was overthinking, and it's kind of magically gone. And it's about the closest thing to magic that exists, although most people haven't done it. They've maybe heard it described on a podcast, but they haven't practiced it effectively. Once they do, their lives rapidly change. And that's a different category of meditation, quote unquote meditation, but it's an entirely different dimension than focus and awareness style meditation. And it's almost like cardio versus weightlifting. Like, they're
Okay.
both arguably equally important, but they're very different things.
Okay. I'll have to try that. I haven't looked into the letting go technique. I do have the letting go book, if you've read
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great
I
book.
got it right here.
Oh, look at that. I've got it right
Yep.
there too, behind me. You can see right there.
Start a book club. Yeah, there it is. The
Yeah.
yellow spine. Yeah, famous.
Yeah, look at that. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, because I've been meditating on and off for a few years. Recently, I find I get in periods where there'll be periods where I'm very consistent, and then I might have like a couple of months off. But over the last, I'd say 6 months, I've been quite consistent where I'll do it nearly every day, and do it for like, I'll set the timer for about 20-25 minutes. But sometimes I'll find I might be too tired, and I'll just like, I feel like I'm zoning out, and then I'm just like, oh, it's done.
Mm,
But then other times I do feel like I go into a deeper state where, like I'm starting. There are times when I'm holding my hands and I go so deep that I can't feel my hands.
hmm
So I'd love for you to explain, like, how do you know when you're deep in meditation? I know there's obviously levels to it, but
hmm
can you, so people are like, oh, like I'm actually doing it properly?
Well, that would be I don't want to be all Zen master about it, but that would be the wrong question to say, like, am I doing it
Yeah.
properly?
I
Because,
thought you were going to say that. I honestly
yeah,
thought you were going to say that. I was like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, I'd love to get you to expand on that.
No, for sure. I mean, you set me up well, so you can do no wrong. But I would say, instead of viewing it as like doing it properly, look at it more as what should be my aim for the level that I'm at. So if I'm beginning, most people they sit down and they go, I can't get my thoughts to stop. The goal of meditation is to get a clear mind. Therefore, I'm failing miserably. If someone's beginning, their goal should probably be something closer to, how do I allow myself to have as many thoughts as I happen to have and just observe them, and then bring my attention back to my focus point if it happens to be something other than your thoughts. Because there's a style of meditation where you're just observing your thoughts, and that is the meditation. But assuming you're doing a focus anchor like your breath, how do I allow my thoughts to pull me away as much as they happen to, but just notice that when it happens and come back to my breath, and not make it a problem that my mind is racing, not make it a problem that I'm shit at this, and
Mm,
just accept that and view it as a process, and view it as, the more I practice, the more my skill will naturally effortlessly grow. And then as I extend the longevity of my practice over weeks and months, but also as I extend the duration of the sessions, it'll give me an opportunity to shift my goal towards how can I find pockets of presence where my mind chatter starts to simmer down, even if it doesn't stop entirely. And I'm
Mm,
in little waves of flow with pure attention on my focus point. So, for example, if it's your breath in your hands, you're going to notice that as you practice, and especially as you allow yourself longer sessions, you'll start to have periods of 10 seconds in a row where it's just pure awareness of breath and hands. And then your mind will kick in and go, oh, I was just on my breath and hands for 10 seconds. That was awesome. And
yeah,
then, you're back in your head, but that's fine because now that you've created that groove in your brain to start to have pure awareness, it'll be easier to drop back into that, generally speaking, throughout the rest of that session. You might even be able to not push yourself, but gently guide yourself and challenge yourself to extend it to 15 seconds and then maybe to 30 seconds. And then maybe you start to hit a wall and you're like, I get into, I don't want to encourage people to like literally count like that and time themselves
mm,
necessarily. It can be good training wheels to start, but I'm saying that more as a general parameter of the deeper you go into meditation, as long as you don't want to fall in the trap of striving for this specific outcome, but you'll just notice if you hold it lightly that you'll get in longer and longer periods of pure flow, I guess you could say. It's a difficult thing to talk about in words because I'm highly conscious of the fact that people then start to make that a goal and then they end up causing themselves strain and tension and pushing. The better way to think of it is, how do I stay balanced with the process? Like, you could imagine yourself as a surfer on a surfboard. How do I stay balanced on the wave? So how do I stay balanced in my meditative posture, so to speak? Not literally, but the posture metaphorically of not being too slack with your attention, but not being too tight at the
yeah,
same time. If I'm too slack, I start to get drowsy and
mm,
sleepy and spacey. If I'm too tight, I start to get stressed and overthinky and a bit tense and anxious. And I'm leaning forward too much for an outcome. That would be like leaning forward on the board or leaning back. How do I just stay balanced on the board consistently over the course of the time that I've given myself in the session, so that these phenomena of like pure flow, pure awareness can start to happen more and more consistently on its own over the course of time? Is a bit of a convoluted way to say it, but the best way I can right now.
no, I think you explained that well. And it's funny because I find there are moments where I am meditating and I'll be like, oh, I'm about to have a moment. And then that
Mhm.
ruins it.
Yeah.
So it's that whole like leaning forward too much. And it's like, how do I shut that up?
Well, and the cool thing, Dylan, is like, as soon as you realize it's just about that balance, it starts to become a feel thing to be in that balance. So your mind is asking, how do I not lean forward? How do I not lean back? That would be like asking, how do I not lean forward or back on the board while you're actually surfing? If you're doing that, you're already overthinking it. It's a feel thing. You just have to feel your feet on the board and just sort of shift your weight accordingly, moment to moment. And if you're not doing that moment to moment when you're thinking about it, you're already a step behind because the wave is moving in real time. And so likewise, when you're meditating, you just start to feel, ooh, I'm trying to force myself into presence a little too much, right? Or ooh, I'm kind of lacking intention in this moment. Let me tighten the screws a little bit. You just start to feel it and start to shift your attentional weight, so to speak, accordingly. And that's when you start cooking with gas.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So yeah, just feel it. And I love the analogy that you use of surfing. That's such a great analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I'd jump onto one of our other questions because I would really like to see your view on it. So, with the self help world, so I do feel that it's very easy to overconsume on, improving yourself and going down rabbit holes to the point you're just on this rabbit wheel. And then I've heard it's like you've just got to focus on living, and things will naturally evolve.
You've
So,
been talking to Matthew McConaughey, I see.
no, I have read his book. Actually, I've got his
Yeah,
book behind me too, Green
there you
Lights.
go.
That is a
He's
great
out there
book.
saying, just keep living, Dylan. Just keep living, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was something he said, but I did read his book. I will
Mm,
say it is actually the first book that I have laughed out loud at. It's a great
mm,
book.
mm.
Have you read it?
I haven't, but I made a Matthew McConaughey meditation,
Oh, really?
and
Yeah.
and then Matthew McConaughey actually recorded a real meditation a couple years after I made it, and people started to Google Matthew McConaughey meditation and they find mine, which is me just doing a
Oh,
Matthew McConaughey impression. And I
yeah, yeah.
think a lot of people are probably really pissed because they're like, oh, I expected this to be the real Matthew McConaughey and it's just some guy doing a shite impression. But oh well, I hope they enjoy it regardless.
That's it. Yeah, so I'd like to get your view on the self-help world, and I do, as I've complimented you on before, I do find that your, like, how you speak on things, it does cut through that noise, and how you
Mm.
do the intentional pause, and yeah, just how you articulate yourself. So I'd love to get your thought or your view on the self-help world and the balancing between, obviously improving yourself, but also just actually living.
Sure. I mean, I think words have a lot of subconscious power. And when I consume, which I rarely do, but when I consume online content, there's part of me that resists that. I find it a bit hokey when I see people say, oh, change the words you're using. Or on a conscious level, there's part of me that thinks it's a bit corny at times to overanalyze word choice. And yet in my own work, I find myself doing it a lot because I see in real time the power that word choice has over whether people stay stuck or whether people move in the direction they want to move in. And to that point, self-help, self-improvement, those terms alone have a lot of subconscious power, I think, in a negative direction, because people who tend to gravitate towards those industries, myself included earlier in my life, tend to have well, I'll just say it straight up, they tend to have self-worth issues. There's no judgment. I came from the same place. And so the feeling is like I feel this sense of low self-worth, and often that comes from not being treated well by others. And so it's like, well, I don't feel like I'm treated well by the world, therefore I feel poorly about myself. If I improve myself enough, if I help myself enough, I will feel better and therefore enough. And it'll be at this magical point in the future where I've achieved this super Renaissance man or woman version of perfection that I'll feel so invincible and impermeable that I'll be beyond criticism. I'll be beyond being hurt. I'll be beyond my lovability ever coming into question, my worthiness ever coming into question. And it's just coming from deep pain, usually, and a deep wound of not feeling enough, not feeling worthy of love. And so the scarier or seemingly scarier, but far more effective path to take is just addressing the wound and healing the wound. Because the truth is, you are enough. You are worthy of love. You are fundamentally equal to everyone else. And that sounds like feel good bullshit from the perspective of someone who's in the wound. It's like, well, I don't feel that. So what fucking good is that to me? But I suppose you just have to trust people who have been through the path if they're telling you that. And that's pretty much what everyone says who's been down that path and explored those roads. Somehow they all magically come to the same conclusion. And they're either all trying to sell books and courses to you, that's possible, or they're telling the truth. And if you're in that position where you're pursuing this idle, endless idea of self-improvement, you could theoretically make a leap of faith and say, all right, I'm going to turn my attention in another direction because this isn't actually working for me. On some level, you feel that gnawing lack that set you out on the path of self-improvement as you traverse that path itself. It never really leaves you because it's a false pursuit, because you're trying to improve something that's inherently whole. It doesn't mean that you can't improve yourself. It just means you probably shouldn't. It's probably less than ideal to use that term. You can grow, you can better yourself, but you ideally, in my experience and opinion, want it to be coming from a place of being grounded in your wholeness, which comes from addressing and healing those wounds.
Yeah, that was spot on. And I would agree with you. It's mainly down to insecurity,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of people go on their self-development journey. And at the end of the day, it is about everyone is on their own path. So we can obviously get advice of other people, but at the end of the day, like, my path is going to look different to your path. Just
Totally.
how it is. So you can get advice from counselors and psychologists and gurus, and they're they can help you a certain way, but there are going to be things that you've got to deal with yourself, and only you know that.
Yeah, and I would say dealing with that wound that I spoke of is in most people's cases best done with some support from a therapist, from a counselor, from a coach, because people just don't know where to start. They get easily overwhelmed. They don't know the territory. And so while what you said is true, ultimately those answers need to be found within. Often the first steps are best taken with someone supporting you. That's what I
I
found.
agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Especially sometimes the best thing that you can do is have someone look at it from their perspective.
Mm,
Sometimes the old saying is like you can get stuck in your own bottle and you can't
mm,
see the label on the other side.
mm.
So it's like having that other person's perspective of what's going on,
Yeah.
and that can really help. And I do find from personal experience, it helps just verbalizing what is going on in your mind. And then sometimes you're like, oh, that is ridiculous. Like it just sounds so silly when you verbalize it. So that's why seeing a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a counselor, just going there and just talking out loud and getting the stuff out of your head into the real world. Not a lot of the time, or not all the time, but there'll be times where you'll be like, oh, that sounds really silly.
Yes, I would say absolutely. That's one of the reasons journaling is so effective, because you're externalizing your thoughts and organizing them as opposed to them being purely chaotic. And the other thing I would say is while talk therapy does work via the mechanism you just described in a lot of ways, I would say a lot of the times it doesn't work because the emotional element is neglected, because people are working from a top-down paradigm a lot of the time where they're trying to think their way out of a trauma or think their way out of emotional pain, and they're not visiting their body with their attention. They're not giving their emotions deep and nurturing attention, which again, from the perspective of a intellectual or cognitive heavy individual, sounds like rubbish. It sounds like complete nonsense. But the proof is in the pudding. Like people who stay stuck in their heads, their trauma stays alive. Their emotional pain stays buried and very much a problem that dictates their life. As opposed to if you're willing to make yourself vulnerable and humble yourself and go into the, and I say humble yourself because there's sort of an attitude, especially amongst intellectually dominant people, that emotions are somehow like inferior or part of your um you know primal self, and somehow less sensible or intelligent. And that's up for debate. I mean, I would land on the side of saying they actually have more intelligence in a lot of ways than our brain. But regardless of where you land on that debate, at the end of the day, if you don't feel the energy stays stuck. And then that energy dictates your behavior no matter how smart you are.
Yeah. So it's all about coming back to your body.
In a
And
specific way,
yeah,
not just in a general theoretical way. Like, oh, I'm going to come back to my body. Okay, cool. I paid attention to my body for a couple moments. That's better than nothing. But it's sort of like the letting go technique that I mentioned. That would be the equivalent of a proper meditation versus, oh, I had a moment of mindfulness. Well, if you had a moment of mindfulness, that's great. It's way better than never being mindful. But if you want to feel a significant shift in your level of focus and attention, go deeper into meditation. If you want to feel a significant shift uh, in how you feel, which is very achievable, but people are stuck in how they feel for decades, so they think it's just the way it is. But if you want to have genuinely less stress on a physical, energetic, emotional level, and genuinely more joy and aliveness and connection, go deeper into emotional work. That's what I would say.
where would the first step be in that? Like, obviously, they could reach out to you and get some support there, but before they take that step, would there be any practical advice that you could give? Would it be, searching up one of your videos on YouTube, or anything that someone could just, after listening to this podcast, start practicing? Would there be like one takeaway?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, regardless of working with me, I would say any somatically oriented, trauma informed coach, therapist, counselor, that word somatic is key because it indicates that they prioritize the body and, generally speaking, the emotions, um, as opposed to a more talk therapy oriented psychotherapist is generally not going to incorporate that as much in their work, although it's rapidly changing. But Yeah, you can go on my YouTube, The Mental Level, and if you go to playlist, there's a letting go technique playlist, and then it has a bunch of tracks for the letting go technique. But again, I would caution people, one, start small and go at your own pace. Don't dive into your deepest traumas and difficult emotions out of the gate. That's not only unsafe, but it's unwise, because you'll kind of tend to blow your nervous system wide open, and you'll scare your subconscious mind that's trying to learn that it's actually safe to feel your emotions. So start with minor stressors in your life, practice that technique, reinforce a sense of confidence and safety that it's safe to do. It would be like riding a bike before you get on a motorcycle. Like, start with something small and safe so that it's like, I can stay upright on two wheels, and once you got that, then eventually you graduate to a scooter and then a motorcycle. So you can use that, but I would only do that if the person is in a relatively stable headspace and are working with relatively manageable emotions. If someone's in really bad shape, like a really dark spot emotionally, mentally, work with someone. No question, that should be their priority. They should go straight to working with someone one-on-one, therapist, counselor, coach, because trying to do that themselves can potentially be harmful.
Awesome. Thank you. No, it sounds very insightful. And uh, one other video I watched before we end this one is, and we can talk on it because I thought it was very powerful, is the one about your roommate.
Mm.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, the
His
short film.
podcast is all about how to get out of your head. And I watched that this morning, and I was like, wow, that is really powerful. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, and then we'll finish it off?
Yeah, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, it's a short film that I made that was based on The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, because in, I think, the second chapter of that book, which is a famous best-selling spiritual book, he talks about how the voice in your head is like a roommate, and it's like having a roommate in your head, and you don't even notice that it's there, but once you start to notice, it's like having this nagging roommate that sometimes criticizes you and says mean things or says random things or distracts you. And would you tolerate that kind of behavior from your roommate? Probably not. And yet you can't really bully the roommate in your head. You can't tell it, hey, shut up, I'm not going to tolerate this from you. It's just going to clap back and say, double down on its behavior. And so the better way, in my experience and observation, as illustrated in the short film, is to change your relationship, to see that it's a scared voice in your head that's trying to help you, to nurture it, to reassure it, to turn to it with understanding and kindness, which again can sound kind of cheesy to people at first, but it's crucial because it's like an inner child in your mind. And if you said to a child, hey, shut up, I don't like the way you're talking to me, the child is going to receive that very differently than if you said, hey, I see that you're scared, but that's a bit rude. And I'd prefer if we had a better relationship. I'd prefer if you tried encouraging me instead. That's actually going to be more useful to me than criticizing me. And people aren't used to talking to themselves in that way, partially because they have some notion that talking to yourself is crazy or something like that. But you're literally talking to yourself all the time in your head anyway. It's just your roommate monologuing. So why not turn it into a dialogue? That would be a little less crazy, actually, because now you have a choice in how you're communicating to yourself, as opposed to the roommate in your head picking up all this conditioning. Maybe it picked up the inner critic from one of your parents or a harsh teacher or coach. And you just said, okay, I'm going to replay that person's criticism in my own head, but in my own voice now, and do that abuse to myself and not question it and just let it run my life and let it criticize me to try to quote unquote encourage me when things don't go the way I like, because that's on some subconscious level what I think will work. Well, it doesn't. It just discourages you and lowers your energy. So what if you flipped it and you said, I'm going to talk back, but from an understanding place, from a nurturing place, from a place where I'm the leader and the parent, and you're sort of reparenting yourself in that way and saying, hey, buddy, I see that you're scared, but it's helpful if you don't criticize me and encourage me instead. And then that little kid that just wants to help you will start to change its behavior pretty quick because it just wants to help you. The only reason it's, for example, criticizing you is because it thinks it's helping you by doing that. So you're literally updating your mental software by opening that dialogue instead of just getting run over by the monologue.
Yeah, I love that. It's similar to parts therapy in a way. If you've heard about parts therapy.
Very similar. I have a whole parts work playlist on my YouTube as well. Super into it.
So my partner is actually a clinical psychologist, and
Cool.
I overhear her listening to a training on on parts therapy.
Mm.
I just get so fascinated with it that I'm like listening, and then at the end of it, I made a YouTube video on what I learned about parts therapy. It's really, really fascinating. One thing that I really wanted to mention there, something that Eckhart Tolle would say, is that everyone, like you would see someone walking around in the street and they're talking out loud. They're talking to themselves, and you'd be like, that person's mad.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
thing is that we're all talking to ourselves. We're just
Yeah.
talking in here.
Yeah.
So we're doing exactly what that person is doing, even though they seem like the crazy person inside
Yeah.
of our minds.
Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. All right, Cyrus, I really appreciate your time. I felt like I did learn a lot. What this
Awesome.
podcast is all about. Was there any final words, final tips, anything you wanted to say before we end it?
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in doing meditation and emotional work, create specific containers for them to do them on a daily basis. Because if you have this idea of like, I'd like to do that, then you're probably not going to do it because your subconscious mind will tend to resist this type of work because it's unfamiliar. And as you're well aware, as a student of psychology, things that we're not familiar with, we'll just avoid. So we have to lead ourselves consciously towards them. So I would say, if you want to do meditation, decide I'm going to commit to 2 weeks of meditation. I'm going to do 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, whatever you decide is the minimum. Set recurring reminders on your calendar, set recurring alarms on your phone as the start time that you want to do it at. Ideally, first thing in the morning, because that way you set your rhythm for the day. You don't let your day get away from you, and then you have to meditate to calm yourself down. Like you're
Yeah.
setting that calm and present tempo for your day, and then do it for 2 weeks. And then when 2 weeks is up, even if you weren't perfect, recommit, readjust your plan. Same with emotional work. I like to do emotional work at night. It's a little bit more relaxed. It's a calmer space to do it in, I find. And set a recurring alarm and say, I'm going to do the letting go technique every day, or you could go at your pace if that feels like too much, but I'm going to do some form of journaling or introspection or emotional work or body exploration, emotional exploration for 15 minutes a night. And I'll do that for 2 weeks as an experiment. Maybe you do them concurrently together, the meditation and the emotional work. Maybe you do the meditation for 2 weeks and then the emotional work for 2 weeks. Whatever it is, I would just encourage whoever's listening to come up right now before you forget with a specific plan, and then set reminders and alarms to back it up for that experiment time frame. And then you're going to integrate it into your life. It's going to be something that you're actually doing and not just saying, oh, yeah, it would be good, I should meditate, blah, 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 blah. You're actually putting yourself in the position to make it happen.
Yeah. I will say from personal experience, trying to figure out where to slot it in, like in your routine, can be so helpful. So sometimes when I'm not going to the gym in the morning, I'll get up, I'll have a coffee, have a shower, and then I'll sit down and meditate for 20, 25 minutes. And then I'll just go about my day. So I do find, like, have a look in your calendar, like where would you realistically most be able to do some meditation or some journaling? What would be smooth? What doesn't interrupt your calendar? And yeah, set reminders, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would challenge people even further. That's not a bad mentality. I would also say, in my opinion, challenge yourself to start the day with it. Because if you just slot it in where it's convenient, you're basically saying, like, my focus, my attention, my nervous system, my mental health, everything is like I can take it or leave it type thing. As opposed to if you believe it's a priority, if you believe this is something that could actually change your life, and it's something that affects every area of your life. It's just your state of mind, your level of calmness in your body, your level of presence and focus of attention. If you understand and you're starting to see more clearly that this is something that affects every area of your life, then just say, I'm going to start my day with this. It's going to be non-negotiable. And then get up early enough if you have to make an adjustment in your schedule to make it happen, and do it for 2 weeks like that, so that you can sort of nuke the part of your mind that of almost everybody's mind that says that's sort of like a secondary priority, and I don't really know if I have time for it, and my life is so busy, and blah 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 blah. That's sort of the trickery of the mind that wants to keep that homeostasis and that comfort zone, to say I'll fit it in when I can. There's nothing wrong with what you said, but I would just challenge people even a step further to say, if this feels like a priority, respect that impulse, follow it, lead yourself, and make it happen.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. So we'll finish on that note, and I'll leave your YouTube and your Instagram in the show notes for people to check out. Yeah, please feel free to like, subscribe, share this around if you found value in it. And yeah, we'll just keep learning.
Sweet.